few months ago, my friend asked me to make him a display case for some of his products. He has a hair studio in Los Angeles, and he said get weird with it, so this is what I came up with. Being that this piece is going to be in a hair studio, I figured naturally we start with the weave. Naturally is probably not the right word there, but I wanted to weave some Purple Heart together for this one because I'd never done it before, and it seemed like it would work, and it did for the most part. Here I have some thin strips of Purple Heart, and I just wanted to see if they would contort and twist without snapping, and they did. Now that's not to say that if you use some thicker material it's not going to snap and crack on you, because it very well may. I suggest if you're going to do this on your own, you put it in a steam bender, a little steam box of some sort, or at least put it in some hot water for a few minutes so that there's some malleability there. I don't know if that's even a word, but it sounds right, so we'll go with it. I believe the final strips I used here were 3/32, so just under 1/8 of an inch thick. I didn't want a super tight pattern, I wanted you to be able to kind of see the product behind the weave here, so I left these squares pretty darn big. As with any weave pattern, all I'm doing here is alternating above and below each of these, and then the next horizontal piece I slide in will be the opposite. If I start above the first one on the first horizontal piece, the second horizontal piece will be below the first and above the second, and so on and so forth, and that's how weave patterns work. Kind of obvious here, but if you're going to do a weave pattern, definitely sand them before you put the weave together. I mean, I shouldn't have to say that, but especially Purple Heart. It likes to get burn marks in it from saw blades. Even if they're pretty sharp, there's still some burn marks because it's such a hard wood. Pause. You also have to watch out for the tannins, especially in Purple Heart. There's a lot of oils that live inside this wood even after it's cut down and drying. Use some acetone to get rid of that. You'll know what I'm talking about. It'll poke through the end finish regardless of what you use, and it won't look great, so if you see any kind of oil seeping out after you cut Purple Heart, definitely use some acetone or some sort of solvent to get rid of that. Now we're moving on to the body, the structure of this piece, which is walnut and Purple Heart again. I mean, it's a great combination. They weren't lying when they said black guys look great in purple suits. I mean, there's a reason that's a thing. Just a side note, if you're ever working with Purple Heart or other woods that are significantly harder than most wood, you want to have fresh blades, because you'll just have burn marks and you're going to be doing a lot of sanding if you don't. So make sure to have sharp or fresh blades when you're cutting this type of stuff. And also, Purple Heart can burn when you're sanding it as well. I've taken pieces to the belt sander and it'll leave burn marks, so just keep that in mind. Sharper blades is less work down the road. I did some rabbet joints here in the body of the case. The Purple Heart strips here are for the top and the bottom, and then the two sides are walnut. I just like when there's some difference between the pieces here. I mean, this whole channel, the whole point of this channel is to do things weird or in a way that I've never seen done before, so. Now normally when I'm inlaying lights, I do the exact shape of the light so it fits in nice and snug. But considering these two lights together were the same length as the actual piece here, I just ran a dado down the middle. So we do a rabbet on the ends, so where the walnut meets the Purple Heart has a nice solid joint. And on the back side we have a rabbet as well, and that is for the back panel, which I did some cool design with some leather and some dowels. You'll see here in a little bit. Make sure you got squeeze out when you're gluing these together, especially something like this that's going to have some heavy usage. This probably is going to have 120 pounds worth of shampoo, I guess. I mean, I'm bald, so I'm assuming that's what is at hair studios. Being that this wood glue is meant to penetrate the wood and get down into the pores of it to connect it, sanding it is a real problem, and you have to sand it pretty deep to get it out for the finish to not look weird. So I'd always suggest wiping your squeeze out off prior, because you're going to save yourself some time and some heartache at the end. Now do yourself a favor, when you're putting these weave patterns together, just clamp the ends of them down at the top like I've done here. Make sure they're all pretty straight as well, so you don't really have to cut much off after all is said and done. Here all we're doing is alternating between the outside two and center piece, and then you see the two stragglers there in between, and you just alternate between the 2 and the 3. Like I said, I wanted a relatively open weave here so that you could see the product behind. There's also lights inside, so they kind of illuminate it behind this when you walk by. The whole point of this was to present his products, not to hide them, so that's what we're going for here. When I was dreaming up this project, I was considering using Wenge and zebrawood, and have zebrawood be the weave pattern, but I didn't feel like taking a small loan out at the bank to get that stuff because the prices were insane at the time. So this is what we went with, and we were both pleased at the end of this project. I'll be honest, this was a few months ago, and I don't remember what I'm even doing here. So, I mean, we got some strips of walnut, we're putting 45s on the ends. A frame of some sort, I guess? I don't remember what this is, so we're going to find out together. We're on a journey of discovery. Let's see if I agree with myself 10 months later. For those of you who are new to the channel, this is a video I made a while ago, so I'm just putting voiceover over top of it. Because currently I'm in the middle of a very large job that I'm taking on by myself, and I don't have time to film another video. But by the time this job is over, I will actually have a dedicated shop for this channel. So, just hang in there with me. What the fuck am I, oh, the doors, what an idiot. Wow, I'm stupid. That's crazy. Yeah, these are the frames for the doors. We did miters, we did a dado down the center. The slot I'm running in these door rails and stiles is going to be on the snugger side. It is so that I can twist the weave pattern on the ends inwards and they apply outward force in that slot. And it's pretty tight friction fit and it won't move around, which is nice. So I went on the thinner side when I was running this slot. You see me here, putting it in. This is the back side of the door, by the way. That's why there's saw marks. I don't know why I didn't sand those out. I think I do. I better have sanded those out after this. I believe I do. Here I'm just using some dark walnut tight bond in the corners. This stuff dries darker than walnut actually does, so unless the finish you're using also adds a bit of a darker tint to your walnut, don't use this glue, in my opinion. I've been a big fan of the tight bond melamine lately. It seems to hold stronger and penetrate more in the wood. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it also dries transparent, so you have way less issues at the end of the project when you're sanding. Make sure to glue your surfaces very well, especially on end-to-end grain like this in a miter joint. I usually do splines or something. I'm pretty sure I did trim head screws on these. I like a nice hard steel fastener when I'm doing something like this, especially a door like this that's going to accordion out almost. And it's not going to be in a track, it kind of just sits on the face, so. Yeah, here we go, I got the trim head screws. These are on the bottom and the top. This thing is at eye level, so unless you're a giant, you're never going to see these. And if you are, I mean, God bless you. You get a lot of perks in life. Seeing a couple of screws that we don't see is not really a big deal. And now we're moving on to the actual floating tambour part of this, which I think I've seen somewhere. I try not to watch things online and be inspired. There's nothing wrong with being inspired, but I like to come up with things on my own as a challenge. I mean, when half the world's using ChatGPT to seem interesting and smart, you should be a person, or I'd at least hope you'd want to be a person, who's genuinely original. That being said, I think I've seen this somewhere, I don't remember, but I just call this floating tambour. You make a little track around the rim here, you put a T-slot in the back of the actual tambour slats themselves, and Bob's your uncle, I guess, is a saying. Get Purple Heart, get a little shaking there. I'm pretty sure I was drinking rain energy at the time, which really gets your nervous system wired up. Someone said, I can't believe you freehand things on the bandsaw, and it's, you know, that kind of shocked me when they said that because how automated is everything that cutting something like a normal way is a surprise to people. It's mind-boggling. The weight and motion of these slats are going to be completely on these two pieces, and they're kind of just floating out there, so I made sure they're square, I used a ton of glue, and I put a spacer between the two so there's no binding or hang-ups between the top and the bottom T-slot in the back of the tambour slats. If that was confusing to you, listen to it on 0.5 speed. It makes sense. Here I'm using a keyhole bit in a table router to make a T-slot in the back of the tambour slats in a very specific location. This is actually a keyhole bit. It is used for putting a keyhole in the back of a picture frame or something you're going to hang on the wall. And it just gives you a place to put a screw through, and it kind of locks itself in place once you set it down. I'm using it here to make a T-shape in the back of this. Now they do have specific T-slot bits on Amazon, which I found, I believe, after this project, so this is what I came up with on the spot without having to wait for something to come in the mail. After I put a T-slot in the back of the Tambour slats, I take it over to the table saw, and I just cut the bottom so that's not a T anymore, and it's just a big fat L, which I'm sure you're familiar with. After that, we're going to rip the Tambour slats down to their final width, which I believe was 3/4 of an inch. And I could have made these thinner, honestly, probably 5/8 if I wanted to when it comes to the thickness or the depth. Whenever you're ripping Purple Heart or chopping it, you want to push it through the blade and do not stop, because when you do, it is prone to burn pretty quickly. So nice, consistent motion. I'm not saying push it fast, but push it consistently. And that's coming from a certified white boy with motion, so that's sound advice there. Once we got all those ripped down, we're going to take them over and we're going to attach them to the tracks, or the balconies, we'll call them, on the side of the case here. You see there's a bit of a hiccup when you put it on, it's not that smooth, and that's because when you do it individually, it's not as easy. And when you put these together, they work together and they slide, and they keep each other in line and balanced. Kind of like humanity, maybe 20 years ago. Not now, but, you know. And here we go, a mock-up. That's generally the cool stuff on this project. Yes, camping footage that nobody asked for. Then why'd you do it, you know? That's pretty nice. Alright, good stuff. Yep, we get it. Camera's a little shaky, by the way. Could use a little warp stabilizer there. Yes, back to work. Lazy. So on the back of these Tambour slats, any of these sharp corners or edges can hang up in that track, as I've said probably 100 times on this channel already, considering there's been a lot of Tambour so far. Because they will in that track. If they catch a corner, they will bind up, and you'll be upset with yourself for not just taking a little bit of time and rounding and smoothing everything over. Now I know it's a little barbaric to leave them square on the edges, on the outside. Usually round them over or use maybe a bevel bit on your router and add a little chamfer to the edge, but I left these ones square. I wanted them to be big and blocky. It's a statement piece. This piece is not to hide the products inside. As you can see by the open weave and the lights inside, it is to illuminate, it's to display them. Here I took some inch dowels that were left over from a project, and I wanted to do something unique with the back. So I've got some Baltic birch plywood, and I'm ripping these dowels down the center. Now that blade absolutely moves when you're cutting something circular like this. So there's some undulations on the back side of these dowels, which I was fine with because I wasn't looking for uniformity. I wanted some chaos. Nice big beaded glue on the back. That's going to do the heavy lifting when it comes to holding these dowels to the plywood. Some nails just to hold them in place. These get wrapped and covered with leather, so I was not worried about any fraying or any gaps on the backside, as you'll see here in a moment. And here we have a nice big swatch, I don't know, I think a swatch is small. Whatever, we have a giant piece of leather here that I believe is from Amazon, and anything in this video from Amazon I'll link below in the description. If you're so inclined to support the channel, go down there and click that. I appreciate it. It's about the only way besides ad money and drawings that I make money on here, because the ads that I get requests for and emails for aren't great. So I've said no to every single one of them actually, so you know. I don't want to say be grateful because you don't owe me anything, but I try not to promote junk or things that I actually wouldn't use or think you wouldn't use. So, here we're stretching the leather over the dowels. This is just an interesting, appealing look I came up with. I don't know how. And I think that looks pretty good. On the unfinished wood, it's kind of contrasty, but once it's finished, it matches pretty well. This back corner here is kind of prohibitive of sliding the Tambour slats on once they're all finished and glued to the leather piece. It's hard to bend that leather in the opposite direction to actually get these to slide into the track. So I just cut that little corner off. Here we are putting the tambour slats together with the leather piece on the back. Could not tell you why I did this before I put finish on them. Kind of a dumb move with some foresight here, but it worked. And I mean, it's still operating beautifully to this day, so just because you're not right doesn't mean you're wrong, you know? As of late, I've been using 3M77 to attach the leather to the tambour slats on most of these projects. On this one and the other ones I've done it on are fine, but recently I've done one where there's heat behind. It was an entertainment center, and that heat actually made the glue fail. So I had to take those off and put wood glue and canvas on the back of that and actually staple each one to the fabric so it's stuck. So if you're in a situation where there's heat, do not use this spray adhesive. Use a contact cement. Look at that. That Purple Heart's just delicious. I mean, if I was a beaver, I'd straight up just eat Purple Heart for the appeal. Beavers also don't eat wood. They chew it. Yeah, look at that. And success. The door slides over those tracks like nothing. Love it when a plan comes together. As I've said, I just think of these things and kind of just go with the flow and figure out how to make them work in person. So I was just as pleased as you were to see that go on and work smoothly. Here we're cutting some 3/8 dowels. These are for the trim head screws that go in the corners here. I believe I was feeling some sympathy for the 6 foot and above community here, and I didn't want them to see these screws, so I put some plugs in there. It was very courteous of me. Now, for the most part, I don't like these mobile plunge-based drill presses, but they have their applications, like this here. You need to be out in the middle of a piece or in a weird spot that your drill press can't access. They were pretty nice. Here we're using CA glue in a walnut plug, and look, you see that expand there in the corner? What a mistake that is, using that, because now there's a dark ring around those. So yeah, they're not staring at a screw head, but they're going to see a dark ring around that, which is just disappointing. Yeah, you can't see it here. When you put the finish on, it really brings out that black line around that plug. I'm using a spacer here, and I'm putting a little... not a tenon, I don't know what you'd call this. This is essentially a track for the edges of the shelf to slide over. I love to put 2 little pieces of wood on the side and then run you'll see here, a dado in the edge of the shelves. And this hides those pieces of wood, and it looks like the shelf is just floating. There's no fasteners that are exposed. There's no ledger for it to sit on. There's no dado for the shelf to be sitting in that you see from the front. And this is a wonderful way to do this. A tabletop router is key to doing any kind of precision work, I'd say, or at least the stuff that I've done on this channel. But when you're running something like this vertically on end grain, I would make sure to just be careful. Slow and steady wins the race in this case. Like a glove. So I had problems with that light just being at the top there. I wanted light on the second shelf as well. So here I took the template, my pattern for the lights, and I actually put a light under the shelf at the top as well, so the top 2 are lit up. Here I'm using a 3/8 inch top bearing router bit. It's for templates, and the bearing runs against the side of that template there, and it just leaves a perfect replica of that rectangle down into the wood underneath it. I use some double-sided tape under the template to hold it to the piece, and then the clamps are just to hold the piece still on the table. In theory, I should make this template bigger so I can just clamp the template to the piece as well as the table all at once and avoid using double-sided tape, because that stuff can sometimes be tricky and leave some residue. Can also like mar your wood when you're pulling it off a bit. So just if you're going to make a template for something like this, just make it big enough to be able to clamp and not be in the way of the router. Yeah, there's a light. Wonderful. Now that top part there is so small because I believe it was for pomade. I believe it's how it's pronounced. Bigger bottles on the bottom, smaller stuff on top. Here we have barrel hinges. These are brass. I've never used them before, and I don't know if I would again. Not a fan of these. They're hidden and they look pretty cool, and it's a cool concept, but I don't know how I feel about the strength of these things, especially over time. Also, you're probably wondering, why am I using a plug cutter to drill the holes for these? That is because I did not have a spade bit that was the right size for this. But this plug cutter, the outside diameter, was the exact size for these. So, improvise, adapt, overcome, or something like that. There's nothing wrong with cobbling something together as long as the end product doesn't suffer in quality. There's a piano hinge in the middle of the back. Could have just used a couple of hinges, but I wanted more screws, kind of sewing these two doors together, just for some strength. Considering that second door is going to be cantilevered off the first, and those hinges, doesn't hurt to think forward. This is what I meant by accordion door. This doesn't really accordion though, because there's no track for that second door. This kind of just folds up when you open it. I don't know if that's a requirement, but in my mind it is. I could be wrong. This is just a dry fit. Just wanted to make sure that those fit in those holes and everything lined up appropriately, which it did. No surprise. Gosh darn professional. I also wanted those shelves to semi-line up with those outside pieces for the tambour track, just for symmetry's sake. And there you have it, all the hard stuff's done, basically. Now we're on to sanding and finishing, I believe. I believe I sand these to 150. I know Rubio suggests you sand them to 120 for it to have the best adhesion, but I think 150 looks the best, personally, and I've seen zero issues with it so far on everything I've done it on, so... We got Rubio Sheen Plus. I used to use this, now I just use regular Rubio. The Sheen is fine, but regular Rubio is perfectly fine as well, the pure. Now this is the part I regretted, not doing this beforehand. I believe this took me 45 minutes per door to get both sides and every crack and corner so there's no dry spots, because those stick out. I also did this after the fact. I don't know what I was thinking, but it worked, so who cares? As long as the end result is what you wanted, who cares how you got there? Unless you got hurt, then, maybe there's something to be said. Man, that Purple Heart is beautiful. You can't tell me otherwise. Doing my best to drill a straight hole into this piece. I've got the table as a backer, because you don't want any blowout on the backside. Pause. Good God. Make sure that's centered up nicely, because if you don't, if it's too high or too low, it's going to put pressure on either the top or the bottom track more than the other one, and it's not going to help the door at least move. To the right of those tambour track pieces, you can see a thin strip of Purple Heart, and that's just to cover the dados from the front view of this. As I said, I like to hide any joints or fasteners. I've got paste wax here in the slot and on the rim, because the rim is where it's going to sit and hang mostly. Put some on the bottom for dexterity's sake. I put multiple coats of this over a few days, and as it dries and hardens and gets pressed into the wood, it makes a pretty smooth surface for this stuff. First assembly after everything's been finished and waxed up. Getting it on there's a bit of a challenge, even though I nibbed that corner off on the back. And here I am just replacing that piece that I routed off in the beginning, and that is just so you can slide this in. I made this piece on the bandsaw, did quite a bit of sanding to shape it to match this shelf, and I used 2P10 to attach it back to this. Now don't forget to scuff any kind of finish you have if you're using 2P10, because this will not stick to finish. It'll stick to wood, which is what you gotta sand down to. I'm using a leather punch to punch a hole so that I can use the fasteners. This is the back panel, and this is how it gets attached to the wall. And then I'm using screws to attach the back to the piece so that this thing is removable. Any type of hinge, barrel hinge, piano hinge, I like to put some oil in it, just so there's no squeaking. I'm pretty sure these squeaked, which is why I did that. here's where that rock climbing strength comes in handy. Just a nice little pinch. Yeah, look at that. Pretty satisfying stuff. Look at that ring around that dowel there. That's cool. Or that plug. And there we have it. That wasn't that hard, honestly. It's just a bunch of small problems that come together and make one nice piece. Here's the old piece that I made for his studio. This is going to be on the opposing wall. And this is Rikki. He's great at cutting hair, I'm told. I don't have hair, so I have no business being here besides being his friend. But he's a lovely guy, and he's a hard worker. And if he wasn't, I wouldn't support him, and I wouldn't be friends with him. So just take my word for it, and go get your hair cut. And once again, it's time for me to stop yapping, and we're going to just look at the piece for a little bit and watch it operate. I'll be back in a moment. And there you have it, another lovely artistic piece in the bag. I appreciate you for being here, thank you. If you enjoyed, please leave a comment, it helps a lot. The algorithm is up to some weird stuff right now, there's been some publicity about it. If you Google it, it'll just say your videos suck, which could be the case here, but I doubt it. So, please leave a comment, subscribe, do all that, help support the channel. And I appreciate you dearly, thank you for being here. Love you, good night.